Matthew Perry was most famous for his role as Chandler Bing.
You didn't cry when Bambi's mother died?
Yes, it was very sad when the guy stopped drawing the deer.
The show was even ranked #1 by its 8th season and was always within the top 10, but not many realised just how troubled Perry was behind the scenes, famously quoting, "You have to get famous to know that it's not the answer, and nobody who is not famous will ever truly believe that." At just 30 days old, his parents were already drugging him.
He said, "If your baby's crying, just give him this." And they said, "Okay." And it was phenobarbital.
By the time he was 10, he was already smoking, stealing, and most notably beat up Justin Trudeau, the now Prime Minister of Canada.
Is that I beat up Prime Minister Trudeau. And, you know, it's possible. And
He would attribute his behavior to feeling like an outsider, quoting, "I was so often on the outside looking in, still that kid up in the clouds on a flight somewhere else unaccompanied." Only 4 years later, he would have his first drink, leading him to become an alcoholic at the age of just 18. But during his teenage years, Perry had become a Canadian-ranked tennis player, practicing for more than 10 hours daily, and would move from Canada to Los Angeles to live with his father, only to discover the competition there was much more challenging, leaving tennis behind and instead focusing on his acting career, following in his father's footsteps.
See your dad on television. I mean, that must have been like amazingly exciting, huh?
Yeah, I think that's probably why I went into it.
So.
Yeah.
Perry would make his first appearance in the series 240 Robert in the episode Bank Job, playing a small role as a child actor. He'd make guest appearances for other small roles between 1983 and 1993, but made his film debut in 1988 with A Night in the Life of Jimmy Reardon, which barely broke through the budget, only making $1 million. In 1993, he would then audition for LAX 2194 as he was desperate for money.
And the job that they got me was called LAX 2194.
But he wouldn't have much luck with that either. Knowing the show would fail, he made an exit and auditioned for a show called Friends Like Us, now known as Friends.
Reading for Marta Kaufman, the executive producer of Friends, tomorrow morning. And I was like, oh my God, I knew my life was going to change.
It was an immediate success, with each cast member being paid $25,000 per episode or $540,000 for the whole season. But issues started forming with his newfound wealth, as Perry would use the money to fuel his addictions, with rejection from fellow co-star Jennifer Aniston just adding fuel to the fire, as he wouldn't get over her until 1988 after she began dating Brad Pitt. Just a year prior, Perry had been involved in a jet ski accident, with doctors prescribing him Vicodin, which he quickly became addicted to, eventually working up to 55 pills per day. It would become so bad that he would steal from open houses just to get his hands on the medication.
Go to open houses and go to the bathrooms in the open house and see what pills they had in there and steal them.
He'd become so addicted that he dropped down to just 58 kilos, at which point he was admitted into rehab and completed a 28-day program. During the early seasons of Friends, despite being heavily addicted to multiple drugs, Perry vowed never to come to work drunk or high, but frequently arrived with extreme hangovers.
But I did work extremely hungover.
But how long could he get away from the effects of the constant drug abuse? Well, they would start to reveal themselves as he would be taken into hospital with alcohol-induced pancreatitis in 2000. His castmates then staged an intervention but were unsuccessful, but this must have had some effect, as just 1 year later he paused the production of Friends and Serving Sarah to go to rehab, causing him to get sued for $650,000, saying, "Small price to save my life."
I'm not going to be able to be in movies, I'm not going to be on the show and have a life unless I fix this problem.
In a later interview, he stated that he had lost 3 years worth of memories on Friends due to the constant drug abuse. Despite these setbacks, the Friends cast were now making $1 million per episode. But during these final seasons, he states that he was often drunk or high, but managed to hide it well despite it crushing him on the inside.
Secrets kill you. Secrets kill people like me.
But not everything was going bad for Perry, as season 9 was the only season that he was fully sober for, and was the only time he was nominated for an Emmy on the show. On the 6th of May 2004, the final episode of Friends was released. This was the end of an era for millions around the world, and Perry walked away with a $100 million fortune in his pocket, with a large portion of it heading towards his addiction, as he'd spent upwards of $9 million on drugs throughout his lifetime, according to a Vanity Fair article. He'd spent most of the money on his 14 stomach surgeries, 15 stays in rehab and therapy twice a week for 30 years, estimating he'd attended more than 6,000 Alcohol Anonymous meetings throughout his lifetime. But Perry never lost his faith though, as he considered himself a seeker, and 3 weeks prior to the audition for Friends stated that he'd prayed for the first time.
And then for the first time in my life, I knelt down and prayed.
Hoping that being famous and living the life of luxury would fix all his problems, but this wasn't the case.
Matthew, it wasn't able to fill the holes. I think that was a powerful realization for you.
Yeah, I mean, I had the American dream happen to me. I got the great job, I was good at it. I bought a house.
As well as his first property, he'd also acquire a portfolio of houses, some of which included a condo purchased from Elton John, a house in Hollywood Hills, a house in Malibu, a cottage in Pacific Palisades, and in 2017 purchased a $20 million condo on the top floor of the Century. Notably not shying away from cars either, with some of his cars including a Porsche Panamera, an Audi R8, a BMW 6 Series, a BMW Z8, and finally a Lincoln Navigator. With him crashing the Porsche twice and being hit whilst in the BMW, but he'd also crashed back into the limelight, being nominated for 2 Emmy Awards and a Golden Globe nomination for his roles in West Wing and The Ron Clark Story respectively. Also featuring in Birds of America, which only grossed a total of $150,000. Luckily, just 1 year later, his film 17 Again would come out, starring alongside Zac Efron, making an easy profit of $100 million. But the film came with some heavy criticism, including dated special effects, lack of depth, stereotypical teenagers, and wasted potential. His next project, Mr. Sunshine, wouldn't fare much better, as it was cancelled after just 1 season due to declining viewership and audience ratings, running from just February to April of 2011. Over the next 6 years, Perry would star in smaller roles with no substantial viewership, even starring in his own play, which performed just as poorly, running for just over a month in 2017, with Perry stating a few years down the line that it was a personal message to the world, an exaggerated form of me as a drunk. I had something important to say to people like me and to people who love people like me. But these downfalls would also reflect in his personal life, as in 2018 he was taken into hospital after experiencing gastrointestinal perforation after his colon burst from opioid abuse. He was in a coma for 2 weeks and spent 5 months in the hospital, stating, "I was put on a thing called an ECMO machine, which does all the breathing for your heart and your lungs. That's called a Hail Mary. No one survives that, and was given a 2% chance of survival." After such an extreme event, you would expect Perry to completely eliminate his drug habit for good, but that's not what happened, as only 2 years later he was at a rehab centre in Switzerland and faked pain to get 1800 milligrams of oxycodone a day and was having daily ketamine infusions. He then had to get surgery while there and was given a shot of propofol, waking up 11 hours later in a different hospital and was told that the propofol had stopped his heart for 5 minutes. The long CPR process also broke 8 of his ribs and therefore was no longer able to join the cast of Don't Look Up, where he was supposed to be starring alongside Meryl Streep.
Supposed to play opposite Meryl Streep. What happened instead?
I got CPR, and the guy who saved my life broke 8 ribs.
When he left Switzerland, he was told he would still get the 1800 milligrams at an LA hospital. He paid $175,000 to fly on a private jet home and was told no. The doctor informed him that cancer patients are only given 100 milligrams, so he booked another $175,000 private flight that same night back to Switzerland. When 2021 rolled around, it marked the release of the long-awaited Friends The Reunion, but shortly before the release he said, "I took a bite into a piece of toast with peanut butter smeared on it and all my top teeth fell out." And he revealed the surgery is the reason his speech is slurred on the reunion. Just 1 month after the reunion, Perry would split with his fiancée, stating, "Sometimes things just don't work out." This left Perry alone once again, as he'd never been able to hold down a relationship for all that long, as Perry recalls his fear of abandonment, which resulted in ending most romantic relationships before the woman had a chance to leave, and being alone was never good for Perry, as he would state in an interview that alone you lose to the disease.
Waiting to get you alone, because alone you lose to the disease.
Perry would further discuss this in his memoir Friends, Lovers and the Big Terrible Thing, which was published in late 2022, discussing most notably his drug abuse, which is the big terrible thing. The book was a massive success and rose to the top of Amazon's best-selling book list. In late 2023, Perry's last activity on social media is his now infamous Instagram post sitting in his pool, unaware that just 5 days later he would take his last breath there. Perry would pass away due to acute effects of ketamine and subsequently drowning, with his dose being equivalent to the general anesthesia given to surgical patients. The Friends cast would make a statement via social media praising the actor along with Zac Efron, who he worked with on the film 17 Again.
Collaborating with him in Burst Ears was so much fun, and it really did propel me and motivate me in so many ways. It really pushed me into the next chapter of my career, and for that, thank you so much, Matthew.